3 spine-chilling true summer vacations. Unexplained horrors revealed in sinister locations. The sun burned like a malevolent eye as the Johnson family cruised down a serpentine road in Minnesota, blissfully unaware of the horrors lying just beneath the surface of their picturesque summer getaway. The car was filled with laughter and the faint scent of Karen's homemade cookies as she flipped through a guidebook, highlighting quaint roadside attractions. Little did they know, they were heading straight into an age-old nightmare. As Dan maneuvered the car deftly through the dense woods, the rustling leaves whispered secrets that danced through his mind. At 10 years old, Lily was completely absorbed in her drawing of the emerald lake that awaited them. Her innocence shielded her from the shadows lurking just beyond sight. The sun drenched their journey, casting warm, inviting glints, but shadows from the towering pines seemed to twitch with an energy of their own. Was it just him, or did the trees whisper? Upon arriving at the lakefront cabin, they were greeted by Earl, the cabin's enthusiastic owner. His tales poured forth with fervor, speaking of the lake's magical allure and the strange tranquility it supposedly offered. Yet something in the townsfolk's smiles felt too wide, too knowing, as they unpacked under an ominous gaze. The air shimmered with anticipation, and a chill crept up Karen's spine. The first night passed as expected, filled with laughter and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. But the serenity ebbed with the second sunset. Karen stepped out onto the porch to calm her racing heart. The whispers intensified, swirling like wind through the branches. That's when she noticed Lily gazing longingly at the tree-line, almost entranced. The eagerness to discover the unknown seemed to pull her closer, a siren call that caused Karen's heart to pound with dread. Then came the old woman from next door. Her voice trembled like dry leaves in the wind. "Watch the child," she warned. "The lake spirit, it loves to call children. It's waiting." Karen's throat tightened at the words. "It's not just a story," the woman said, eyes sunken as if drained of life. Dan chuckled, brushing it off, but Karen's heartbeat quickened. A warning, or just an old wives' tale? The air felt stifling with tension as the final night descended like a shroud. The stillness became suffocating. Gathering around the campfire, the crackling flames cast flickering shadows against the trees, heightening their fear. Out of the darkness, the sheriff appeared, his expression inscrutable. Karen's instincts screamed danger, but the sheriff just nodded, a dismissive smile crossing his lips. "Enjoy your stay." Suddenly, a shriek shattered the night, piercing their tranquility. Panic washed over them as they looked for Lily, but the darkness swallowed her laughter whole. Dan and Karen rushed towards the twisting shadows on the edge of the lake, the whispers swirling into a deafening roar around them. They hesitated, hearts racing, knowing the folklore they had dismissed was now pulling their little girl into its depths. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With every step towards the water's edge, the summer night deepened, the alluring chill clawing at their sanity. A figure loomed near the tree-line, cloaked in shadows, yet irresistibly charming, spinning tales steeped in longing. They couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and all too faintly, they heard a child's laugh flutter through the trees. Was it Lily's? Time unraveled as they felt drawn to the whispering depths, drawn to the truth, as the night thickened, and their desperate search morphed into a battle against the very legend that had turned their summer dreams into waking terror. Would they find their daughter before the lake claimed her forever? The darkness closed in, thick and suffocating. Karen's pulse thundered in her ears as she strained to hear Lily's laughter again, but only the wind howled, mocking their desperation. "Lily," Dan's voice cracked, slicing through the eerie quiet. Every step felt like wading through molasses, heavy and agonizing. Karen clutched Dan's arm, panic coiling tight in her chest. They had to find her. They had to. Suddenly, a faint glimmer appeared on the water's surface, reflecting the moonlight like a beckoning finger. Both parents halted, their throats dry with dread. The lake, once a serene place, now seemed to pulse with an ominous life of its own. "We need to get close," Dan said, though a tremor betrayed his bravado. With every stride toward the water, the air thickened, stinging with an otherworldly chill. Shadows danced at the corners of their vision. Karen turned to ask Dan if he saw them, but his face twisted in a mix of fear and resolve. "Stay close," he whispered as he took the lead. "Lily," Karen cried out again, her voice wavering. The shadows flickered and seemed to pull back, revealing glimpses of the lake's depths dark, murky, with something slithering just beneath the surface. The instinct to run fought against the need to stay. And then, a giggle echoed through the trees, a sweet sound that twisted into a wail. "Lily!" They rushed toward the noise, hearts racing. The sound was almost human, yet tangled with a taunting quality that tangled their senses. "Lily, where are you?" Panic clawed at Karen's throat. Ahead, a pale mist began to rise off the lake, swirling around the base of the ancient trees. Within it, shapes shifted, shadows swirling into indistinct figures. The temperatures dropped further, and Karen shivered uncontrollably. "Dan, this isn't right," she whispered, but he pressed on, determination blazing in his eyes. That as they reached the shore, the shimmering surface of the lake beckoned. The mist thickened, coiling in on itself. Suddenly, Lillian's voice pierced through, clear and melodic. "Mommy, Daddy, I'm here." "Lily," they shouted in unison, but as they turned toward the source, dread coursed through Karen's veins. Reflecting off the water, she saw a small figure standing on the opposite bank, dark hair flowing wildly, skin glowing unnaturally bright. But the eyes, those eyes were voids, reflecting nothing but a captivating darkness. "Don't come any closer," Karen screamed, her voice losing power as the figure swayed like a tree in a storm, entrancing and unnatural. The whispers grew louder, wrapping around her, threatening to pull her into the lake. "Join us," they sang sweetly, luring both Dan and Karen deeper into the shadowy embrace of the shoreline. Desperation clawed at Dan. "We'll find her together, just hold on." But holding on was becoming nearly impossible. As the whispers wrapped around her, Karen felt her thoughts blurring. It was getting harder to feel her own body, harder to think straight. In the distance, she saw another shimmer of figure. Not Lily, but a boy now, clutching something in his hands. It shimmered like a jewel before slipping into the water. Karen's heart raced, her instincts screaming that whatever it was, it had to be stopped. "Stop!" Karen shouted, suddenly breaking through the haze. The shadows recoiled, the whispers faltering. That scream brought clarity, but now the figure on the bank twisted into a monstrous form, neither child nor person, an amalgamation of nightmares come alive. Then everything fell silent. The shimmering lake calmed, reflecting the moonlight eerily. But in that moment of unexpected quiet, someone gasped. Karen's heart dropped as she whipped her head around. There, further along the shore, a figure stood, Lily's small frame, unnaturally still. "Lily!" But the air shifted again. The child's giggle echoed back, now layered with something darker, something ancient. "Mommy, Daddy," as that familiar voice rippled through the night. It spoke with an unsettling undertone, hinting that their daughter was no longer just an innocent child, but perhaps something else entirely. Come to play. Would they be able to save Lily before the lake spirit consumed her? The moon hung high, casting an eerie glow, as dread seeped deeper into the night. The Johnsons were trapped, and the call of the lake grew louder, more insistent. Would they succumb to its seductive grasp? "Lily," the single word clawed out of Karen's throat, a desperate plea crashing against the stillness. The little figure remained motionless, too still against the swaying backdrop of the trees. The air thickened with something sinister, a heaviness that hinted at unseen forces gathering. "Don't move," Dan hissed, though his own voice trembled. But Karen couldn't help herself. She took a step forward, instinct dominating reason. "She's here, Dan. I can feel her." The shadows twisted like serpents, crawling closer as their outlines contorted into grotesque shapes, features merging and splitting with every flicker of the moonlight. "Mommy, Daddy," the voice floated back, a whisper that sent shivers racing down Karen's spine. The laughter that once brought joy now bore a distillation of dread. Karen's heart hammered against her ribcage, each thud echoing her fear. "Lily," she cried again, louder, as if sheer volume could banish the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, the figure stirred. With an unnatural grace, it swayed slightly, the long hair dancing in the breeze like shadows animated by ghostly hands. Then it turned, revealing eyes that were pools of darkness, seemingly drinking in the light. "Come play," the words spilled out, sweet, yet laced with malice. "No, not our Lily," Dan shouted, grounding Karen momentarily in his determination. But the momentary clarity was fleeting. In the blink of an eye, a rush of cold air swept over them, wrapping around Karen like icy fingers. The shadows pressed closer, almost tangible, an unholy tide of whispered promises and sinister laughter. "Join us," the echoes multiplied, each voice distinct, yet harmonizing into a maddened choir. "Help her. We have to help her," Karen shouted, the urgency clawing at her. She reached out toward the figure, but an invisible barrier seemed to pulse around it, bending light, warping reality. "Step back." Dan's arm shot out, pulling her back just as a deep, menacing growl emanated from the lake. A ripple spread across the surface, and the calm waters roiled violently, surfacing blackened shapes that churned in the depths. "What is happening?" Karen gasped, every instinct screaming to flee. But the sight of Lily, her daughter, drove her to push through the fear. "Lily, please, come back." The laughter morphed again, transforming into an unsettling cacophony that rattled in Karen's core. "She belongs to us." The figures around the lake swirled wildly, as if relishing the chaos. Eternal voices entwined in curses and laughter, pulling the night deeper toward despair. Dan pressed his back against Karen, shielding her with desperate strength. "We'll wake her. We'll bring her back," he pleaded, hopelessness creeping into his resolve. A flash of silver broke through the shadows, and the boy from earlier reappeared, now with eyes wide open terror. "You need to leave. She is not herself anymore. The lake has taken her." "What do you mean?" Karen gasped, the implications like ice in her veins. The boy stepped closer, eyes darting back toward the lake shore. "Your daughter, it's not just the water. It's feeding on her." The ground beneath them trembled, and something monstrous erupted from the lake, a gigantic, twisted assembly of limbs and mouths, fastening onto the boy, dragging him toward the depths. "No!" Karen screamed, her heart racing. Dan's grip tightened, and he let out a wild shout. "Run! We have to go?" But how could they abandon Lily? Another chilling giggle split the air, slicing through the shadows. The lake churned as the monstrous apparition writhed, pulling the young boy down in an echoing gasp. The murky waters glistened, eager for new prey. In that moment of terror and urgency, Karen saw Lily's small frame begin to dissolve into the mist. "No!" The twisted laughter surrounded them, as Dan shouted again, "We won't leave without her." But the darkness pressed in, feeding on their fear, blurring the lines of reality and drowning the last remnants of hope. "Come back." Karen's voice trembled, a whisper lost in the chaos. The shadows began to close in around them, tightening their hold with every heartbeat. The chilling laughter crescendoed into a horrid symphony. The mist engulfed them. Time seemed non-existent beneath its relentless embrace. Just as they feared they might lose everything, a piercing light erupted from the center of the lake. They froze in place, caught between the world of nightmares and an unknown salvation. What had they awakened? In the depth of the unknown, a question echoed: could they survive the lake's malevolence, or would they join the countless souls it had claimed before? A blinding glow radiated from the lake's center, slicing through the oppressive darkness like a knife. It pulsed rhythmically, casting strange shadows that danced around Karen and Dan as if the very air was alive with energy. "What is that?" Dan whispered, a mixture of awe and dread etched on his face. It's the light. It has to mean something." Karen strained to see beyond the blinding brilliance. Could it be the key to saving Lily? Lily's visage flickered at the edge of the light, her small mouth forming words that echoed hauntingly in the stillness. "Mommy, Daddy," each syllable dripped with a mix of innocence and something darker, something that sent shivers racing down Karen's spine. The laughter from the lake crescendoed, drowning out her thoughts. The monstrous shapes loomed closer, fed by the grief and despair brewing around them. The boy's terrified expression flashed through her mind. The lake is hungry, it feeds on her. But was it the light they needed, Or were they becoming ensnared deeper into the lake's sinister embrace? As if sensing their hesitation, the grotesque shapes in the water twisted, emerging anew. Faces formed, mouths stretching into horrific grins, their hollow eyes locking onto Karen and Dan. "Join us," they sang, voices dripping with malice, mixing with the laughter. "No." Dan's voice quaked, filled with desperation. "We have to fight." Karen felt a surge of rage. What if those shadows were truly her daughter's prison? What if this was all a lure, designed to keep them from saving her? "We want to be afraid," she yelled, the words ripping from her throat, raw and furious. "Lily, we're coming." The light flickered, a brief spark in the growing darkness. As if commanding the shadows, it beckoned to them, a promise of hope intertwined with dread. With renewed determination, they charged toward the radiant figure, ignoring the horrific forms swirling around them. The shadows recoiled as they neared the light, snapping and hissing, almost as if repelled. Each step felt like wading through molasses. The oppressive weight of dread bore down as Karen fought. Through tears her heart screamed for her daughter. "We love you, Lily. Please, fight for us." Suddenly, the light exploded, enveloping the entire area in blinding brilliance. It pierced through the fog, overwhelming the sinister laughter with a sound like wind chimes in a storm. The cacophony morphed, distorting into cries of anguish, rattling their bones. For a moment, Karen felt weightless, as if the light was lifting her from the grasp of the shadows. She reached out instinctively, willing every fiber of her being to connect with the radiant form of Lily trapped in that chaotic whirlpool of energy. "Mommy, Daddy," the call echoed, not out of desperation, but with a fierce strength that made the ground tremble beneath their feet. The air crackled, and in a heartbeat, darkness surged forward again, claws grasping, shadows rearing back like coiling serpents. An anguished roar erupted from within the depths of the lake, as something ancient and malevolent stirred, awakening with fury. A massive form, thrumming with the pulsating energy of the light, began to surface, a beast born from nightmares, shadowed but radiant. Its eyes glinted with both hunger and a sense of recognition. "Do you see it?" Dan yelled over the chaos, pointing towards the creature. "It's as if the lake is alive. It wants her." Suddenly, the grotesque figure transformed, resembling Lily for the briefest heartbeat. But this was not their daughter. It was an abomination forged from their fears and hopes, a monstrous reflection feeding off love twisted into agony. "Lily!" Karen screamed, a desperate final plea as she was yanked back by a force that clawed at her sanity. The ground shook violently, cracking beneath their feet. The light and dark collided in a cataclysmic clash, and in that moment of turmoil, time seemed to stand still. "What if we don't get her back?" Dan's voice trembled with raw panic, cutting through the chaos. And then it hit them. To save Lily, they might need to confront their own shadows. As the beast roared, the lake boiling with chaotic energy, a chilling realization settled in their hearts: this battle was far from over. Would they face their deepest fears together, or would the darkness pull them under forever? The air crackled, heavy with electricity. Karen's heart raced, each beat drumming a frantic rhythm of fear against her ribs. The creature's eyes pinned her in place, eyes that flickered in and out of existence, as if reality itself were unraveling before them. "Dan, we can't let it take her." Karen's voice was barely a whisper, consumed by the roaring chaos. She felt the weight of 1,000 souls pressing in, pressing down, urging her to abandon hope. But she bit down hard, clenching her fists. "I won't let that happen." The beast lunged, a shadowy maw stretching wide in a gaping snarl. As it advanced, its features morphed, now a mass of teeth and horror, now echoing their daughter's gentle laughter, blending love with the grotesque. The cacophony of voices surrounded them, each one pleading, begging, and taunting, leaving them disoriented. "Look!" Dan shouted, pointing toward the center of the light. A searing beam pierced the murky gloom, a clear path amidst the chaos. There, suspended in the ethereal glow, was Lily, her form shimmering like a mirage. She reached out, her tiny hand stretching toward them, fingers wiggling in excitement or desperation, it was hard to tell. "Lily!" Karen's voice pulled the word from her soul, echoing into the abyss. But even as she stepped forward, shadows snaked around her, clawing at her legs, drawing her back toward the abyss that loomed like a hungry maw. Panic set in. She staggered, then fought against the grip, each tug feeling like a premonition of failure. "Don't look away," Dan yelled, raw determination fueling his voice. "Stay focused on her." Forcing herself to turn from the gnashing beast, Karen locked eyes with Lily's shimmering form. That connection, that gleam of hope, propelled her. "We're coming for you, sweetheart." But as they pushed through the darkness, the lake roared in protest, thrashing against them like a living thing. The waters churned angrily, spitting vicious webs of shadows that flicked out like serpents, hungry for their fear. Each lash of darkness stung like a cold flame. Then, as if responding to their resolve, the monstrous appearance of Lily split wide, revealing not just the reflection but horrific truths layered within her semblance. They saw their fears lost time, forgotten memories, and false solace, their darkest doubts spilling forth in twisted echoes. "You wanted to be safe." The monstrosity belted, its voice a chilling amalgamation of their daughter's innocence and the torment the lake thrived upon. "No, we wanted to protect you," Dan shouted, despair clawing at his vocal cords. In that moment, clarity sparked. "Remember," Karen gasped, "we won't let it manipulate our love. Our fears can't bind us." Drawing in a breath thick with desperation, she and Dan stepped closer to the light, the warmth inviting yet perilous. The creature writhed, gnarled hands clawing through the air, summoning shadows to envelop them both. "You will never reach her," it screeched, threatening the very essence of their bond. Yet with every step toward the light, their resolve solidified. They were stronger together, willing to face what nightmares lurked within. Karen raised her arms, wrapping Dan's tight, and together they stepped into the piercing beam of light. In an instant, darkness exploded around them in a blinding eruption. Shrieks tore through the air, echoes of the beast's anguish. But with the blast of agony came clarity. They were no longer bound merely by fear. They grasped the truth of their love and held tight as the shadows hissed, disintegrating against their newfound strength. On the count of 3, Dan shouted, "We'll dive together." The world dimmed, the cacophony fading, and they stood on the precipice of the light. Karen nodded, her heart synchronized with Dan's. 1, 2, 3. As they leaped forward, a sudden chill swept over them, piercing to their core. The light flickered like a heartbeat, pulse weakening under the strain. Did they make the right choice? The shadows retaliated, swirling in a fury, but in that moment of tension, something shifted in the air. The laughter turned to screams, and it felt as though the universe held its breath. Were they on the verge of salvation or damnation? Below, the lake bubbled violently, and something emerged beneath the waves, its form twisted and black. "What is that?" Dan gasped, the terror setting in as realization dawned. Whatever awaited them could change everything, and the journey to save Lily was far from over. What lay ahead would test not just their love, but their very souls. The world collapsed into a violently shifting maelstrom, and as they plunged through the light, Karen's stomach flipped. For a brief moment, she felt weightless, suspended between hope and despair. Then, with a splash that sent icy tendrils racing up her spine, they broke through the surface into the unforgiving lake. They gasped for breath, their bodies engulfed in the frigid water, but the pull of darkness still lurked just beyond reach. "Dan!" she yelled, her voice barely piercing through the cacophony around them. The shrieks of the beast resonated in the depths, mingling with frantic splashes and spluttering breaths. "Where's Lily?" He swam closer, eyes wide with fright, but the lake surged violently around them, darkened by reverse reflections that broke the weight of their fragile reality. Terrified waves lashed at their bodies, making it hard to keep their heads above water. "Over there." Dan pointed blindly into the murky depths, but shadows clawed at the edges of his vision. Every stroke felt heavier, each shiver ripping through Karen as she pushed against the cold water. She caught a glimpse of Lily's form, still glowing, shimmering just beyond the grasp of the writhing shadows. "We can reach her." But with every ounce of strength, the lake roared back, swirling and gurgling, slapping them down. It was as if the water itself was angry, cursing their intrusion. The shadows began to obey, rising and wrapping around her legs like bands of iron. Don't fight it. Dan's voice cracked under the pressure. It wants us to lose hope. They had to keep their hearts steady despite the terror. Karen forced the panic down, shoving shadows away, pulling Dan toward her, knit together with desperation. The vision of their daughter glimmered in their minds, sealing their resolve. Through the chaos, a creaking sound emerged, like the groaning of ancient wood. The lake trembled, and a massive figure began to emerge. It loomed larger than the shadows that coiled around it, amorphous and monstrous, spilling darkness like mud sloshing from a bucket. "What is that?" Dan shouted over the roar, his voice hopelessly lost, swallowed by the water. The thing roared back an amalgamation of furious whispers and desperate cries, weaving through the damp realm. "You want her? She doesn't belong to you. You're not worthy." "No," Karen screamed, feeling an energy swell within her, an echo of every mother's love. "You can't take her." The layers of terror caved in, and she lunged forward, powering through the water, hand outstretched toward the shimmering light of Lily. Then, a violent push surged through her, the force of the lake attacking her spirit. It threatened to unravel her thoughts, drowning her in hopelessness. More tendrils shot out, wrapping around her throat, constricting, squeezing life out of resolve. "Karen," Dan rasped, fighting against the currents, but the shadows were relentless. They snarled and shrieked, pulling him away from her, the distance stretching like a taut wire ready to snap. She couldn't lose him too. Not now, not ever. With an anguished roar, she ripped herself from the grip of the tendrils, her limbs burning, and she darted forward. Just within reach, Lily's hand glimmered like a beacon, illuminating the path. "Hold on to me," Karen cried, desperate to overcome the darkness that choked their bond. But then, out of the depths, the black monstrosity shot forward, crashing in waves, sending a spray of icy water through the air. It was right there, hungry for their despair, and it twisted its features into a grotesque semblance of their daughter, warping innocence into malevolence. "Let her go?" Dan roared, lunging again, but he was dragged further away, sinking into a whirlpool of shadows that he was slipping, and the light flickered, wavering with uncertainty. "I won't let you take her," Karen bellowed, fighting against the growl of the beast, but doubt crept in, gnawing at her heart. Were they strong enough? Could love withstand the horror lurking in the darkness? As the waters churned with despair, she reached for Lily, but the lake was a wild beast itself, ready to claim its prize. Would she drown alongside her nightmares? Or could a flicker of hope break through the abyss? No, she had to believe. The truth surged through her, and she plunged into the darkness head first. Lily. Suddenly, the surface exploded, a fountain of grief and love erupting as shadows writhed and screamed. Karen's world blurred, but her heart beat loudly, undeterred. But as she reached the light, something cold and jagged seized her, and in that instant, the world around her was consumed in a riotous howl of unearthed terror. Where was Lily? What had she uncovered beneath the surface? A chilling thought crept in. Something far more sinister awaited. "Dan!" she shouted, but her voice was swallowed by the dark, leaving her breathless, in the depths of the lake. A new horror rose, an impenetrable dread lurking just out of view. What awaited them was only the beginning. The water around Karen swirled with malevolent energy, churning like a stormy ocean. Her heart hammered in her chest, each panic-driven beat echoing louder than the monstrous roar of the dark entity looming just beyond her sight. She fought the frigid grasp of the lake, searching, desperately seeking the warmth of her child. Lily's light, a beacon in the engulfing shadows, was still glowing, yet it felt impossibly far. The beast thrashed. A new wave of shadows surged forward, swallowing her whole. Breathless, Karen's mind raced, piecing together fragmented thoughts. What if she couldn't save either of them? What if hope was a mere flicker against the galactic void of despair? Focus, she told herself, the instinct of a mother clawing its way to the surface. She felt a surge of power. "I won't let you win." But the lake retaliated, a monstrous heartbeat thrumming through the depths. Each intake of breath was a struggle, and shadows tightened around her like a vice. Panic arose, squeezing the air from her lungs. She felt them slip. Dan, Lily, the life they built together. Lily, Her voice sliced through the cold darkness, a rogue echo that bounced off unseen surfaces. From the depths, a chilling laughter reverberated, filling the air with an unsettling echo. It sounded like their daughter, taunting and twisted, her innocence distorted by the abyss. "Mommy!" The voice rose, insidious in its charm, playful yet dripping with danger. "You can't stop it. You can't save him." What was happening? The lake was warping her perception, twisting her memories into grotesque versions of reality. Anxiety clawed at her mind. She had to keep sight of the true Lily, the one she loved, but it was getting harder. Memories flooded back her laughter on sunny days, the sparkle in her eyes when she ran toward her after a long day. The shadows danced, taunting her, yet within the chaos, she glimpsed Lily again, gleaming defiantly against the nightmare. "Mommy, don't let go." The urgency in her voice pulled at something deep within her, a primal instinct stronger than the darkness. Karen surged forward, pushing through the suffocating waves, each movement like wading through a nightmare. She spotted Dan, anchored in a spiral of shadows, desperately fighting against the darkness. "Dan!" she yelled, but he was submerged, the water consuming him as he struggled against despair. That a visceral scream clawed from her chest, but the shadows wrapped tightly around her and pulled her back. "No, we want to be taken," she cried, fighting her way to Dan, determined to free him from the shackles of fear. Yet just as she reached for him, the monstrous form of the lake's guardian erupted beneath the surface, a swirling whirlpool opening like a maw. It grasped at everything around it with clawed appendages, dragging those entranced into the yawning abyss. "Mommy, help us!" Lily's voice echoed again, a desperate plea cutting through despair. "No." Karen swirled to face the hideous creature. Her heart swelled with raw emotion. "You can't have them. Not today." The shadows recoiled, shrieking in pain as her love for Lily ignited something within her, a surge of warmth that threatened to drown out the darkness. With every ounce of strength, she pulled her arms in tight, readying for one final push. It was now or never, but just as clarity broke through, the lake shifted, hurling her and Dan towards the opening. The dark maw roared, a chilling sound that echoed all around her. They teetered on the brink of oblivion, the monster's laughter swirling with betrayal. And finally, realization crashed over her like icy waves. This wasn't just a struggle for survival. It was a fight to reclaim their very existence. Would she be able to seal the bonds of love tight enough to escape? Or was the darkness set to consume them all? Something more sinister loomed, waiting to strike once hope began to flicker, and as the water surged forward, threatening to drown them, a riddled whisper filled her mind, a demand for an unspeakable price. What would they have to pay to survive? The waves erupted around Karen, chaos drenching her in a cold, suffocating grip. She felt Dan slip further, his form wavering in the abyss, and time fractured around them, each second stretching painfully as the dark maw roared hungrily, demanding its due. "Hold on," she screamed, her voice vibrating with desperate urgency as she thrust her hand toward Dan. Reaching for the light she refused to lose. The pull of the water felt like frozen fingers wrapping around her limbs, gripping her with dread, yet she pressed on. Then, an echo of laughter, a betrayal that was simultaneously haunting and grotesque, sliced through the dreadful soundscape. "Mommy," sang the monstrous imitation of her daughter, a melody turned dark. "Why do you fight? It's pointless." The shadows shivered in delight, encircling Karen like a nest of vipers, closing in mercilessly. Every instinct screamed at her to let go, but love ignited rage within her. "I said no." She thrust her hands forward, picturing the warmth of Lily, fighting against the shadows with the image of her daughter's innocent smile. A blinding light surged from her heart, radiating against the encroaching blackness, momentarily pushing it back. The weight lifted by mere inches, yet that was enough to ignite hope. The shadows hissed as they recoiled from the warmth, their laughter fading, replaced by a high-pitched wail of frustration. "Dan, take my hand," she urged. The anchor of her love fought against the tide, a tether pulling her toward him. With a Herculean effort, Dan broke through the shroud. His eyes were wild, fear mixed with determination as he grasped her hand. The moment their fingers intertwined was electric, a jolt of fervor igniting their connection against the despair wrapping around them. But the darkness was relentless. The whirlpool stirred, drawing them back, churning with an insatiable appetite as the creature came crashing up, its eyes now set on them with predatory intent. Shadows reached out, clawing at them, seeking to drag them down into the depths. Lily, Karen cried as the light flickered again in the distance, a frantic beacon flickering between realms of existence. We're coming. They pulled against the tide, every stroke in the water an act of rebellion, as dread clawed at their minds. Yet the shadows were stronger than they imagined, and doubt crept in, slithering into the spaces in their determination. Are we strong enough? Dan gasped, his face twisting in pain as the shadows tested their bond. I want to lose you. Not to this. The anger surged, and with every ounce of strength, she flung herself toward the light, dragging Dan along with her, their love shining like a beacon in the shrieking dark. But the maw of despair yawned wider, swallowing them whole as the echoes of Lily's taunts grew into a cacophony. You'll pay, oh, how you will pay. Just as it seemed they would be drawn into eternal darkness, her heart thundered with an idea, a memory of something she'd read long ago, something that might save them. But the shadows were closing in again, filling her with uncertainty and dread. Do I dare? She thought, grappling with the newfound knowledge spinning in her mind. Time pinned her at the precipice of choice, the water swirling beneath, gurgling like laughter waiting to consume them. What would it cost them their very souls? The darkness loomed, like a predatory beast, waiting. There was no turning back now. But what would they have to sacrifice to escape from the clutches of the lake's malevolent heart? The darkness throbbed, alive and pulsating as if it were a conscious entity. Karen could feel its breath cold and stale on the back of her neck. The shadows were still, biding their time, whispering promises of despair. She could see a flicker of Dan's fear mirrored in his eyes, and doubt gnawed at her heart. Think, Karen, she urged herself. She could still feel echoes of the light that had surged within her. What if that was the key? We have to harness it, whatever this is. Karen, Dan's voice cut through her thoughts. What do you remember? His grip tightened around her hand as the vortex beneath them roared, longing for their surrender. There was a story, a spell, she stammered, panic seeping in. Something to bind it. A chant, but could she remember the words? Shadows coiled and crept, hungry for their despair. As the darkness twisted around their legs, a haunting presence whispered through her memories. She pulled deep, grasping at the remnants of the arcane knowledge buried within. Dan, she said, her voice quivering, if we're going to do this, it means trusting the darkness, using it against itself. She felt the shadows tense, as if aware of her intentions, watching, waiting. Can we really? Dan's voice trembled, fear lacing every syllable. Are you sure it won't make things worse? We have no choice. She shouted above the cacophony, drawing strength from her determination. If this works, we can turn it against the thing that wants to claim us. The whirlpool intensified, as if the very lake was aware of their plan. The pull deepened, a feral roar echoing in its depths, threatening to tear them apart. Yet, with the fear thrumming in her heart, she stilled her breath and focused. Ready? She asked. Dan nodded, albeit hesitantly. With both hands clutched tightly together, she spoke the first words that danced from her memory, her heart racing. By the light within, I bind thee, shadow and night, release us from your grasp. Yield before my sight. A surge of energy coursed through her as the words spilled from her lips, the darkness around them buckling momentarily. She felt a thrill, a stab of hope piercing through the oppressive weight. But the shadows screamed, thrashing in fury, clawing at their legs like angry beasts. Again, Dan shouted through gritted teeth, panic clawing at his voice. Don't stop. By the light within, I bind thee, shadow and night. She cried out again, louder, fiercer. The lake rippled, the surface nearly boiling as the shadows writhed, seeking to reclaim their hold. And then, a deafening silence. The screams faded, the shadows paused. For a heartbeat, everything stood still, a calm so palpable it was terrifying. Karen's heart sat heavy in her chest, awaiting the onslaught she feared was still to come. Then, crackling laughter reached her ears, low and mocking. It reverberated off the walls of her mind like a cruel taunt. You think you can bind me? The voice was familiar, yet grotesquely distorted. It sounded like Lily but twisted into something vile. Karen's breath caught. The shadows whipped forward again, impossibly fast, closing in around them, thrashing through the water with renewed fury. Porcelain vessel, let them pay. The voice howled, echoing with an otherworldly fury. You can't save them, cruel mother. No. Karen screamed, desperation swelling inside her like an ocean wave. Panic pounded in her veins like a siren wailing for attention. She couldn't lose them both. Fight it, she urged, pushing the light back toward Dan, hoping to bridge their connection. But the shadows advanced, feral and relentless. They had lied, lured her in with their promises of hope only to snatch it away. And then a figure appeared in the darkness, something emerging from the depths, its shape distorting in the shadows. Was it Lily? No, it couldn't be. Not yet. Dan, she cried, fingernails digging into his skin as the water erupted and pulled them under. What would they have to face next? The grasping darkness twisted around her, wrapping tighter, and the last thing she saw before everything fell away into hazy depths was that familiar, sinister smile breaking through the veil of black. Time to decide who you truly are, what awaited them in that eternal murk. Would they meet the darkness, or something worse? The lake roared, its monstrous depths howling in protest. Karen's pulse raced as the shadows clawed closer, a wicked multitude whispering and threatening to swallow her whole. The sight of Lily, forever shimmering in the distance, urged her on, fueling her determination. Fight with me, Dan, she shouted, grasping his hand tighter. We can't let them win. She surged forward, pulling against the stinging cold that wrapped around them like a shroud. The shadows writhed, rising fiercely, as if feeding on their resolve. A flickering memory of warmth permeated her heart, reminding her of sunny afternoons spent with Lily, laughter weaving through the air like music. Remember, Karen urged, the words spilling from her like lifeblood. We love each other too much to let this monster take any of us. With a desperate heartbeat, she shouted, by the light within, I bind thee, shadow and night. Release us from your grasp. Yield before my sight. This time, her voice rang with purpose, drowning out the cacophony of the lake. For a moment, the shadows paused, disbelief lingering in the crushing silence. Hope flickered, light igniting in the dark corners of her thoughts. Again, don't stop. Dan's voice broke through the tumult. By the light within, I bind thee, shadow and night. She echoed again, urgency pulsing through her. The lake rippled violently, shadows flicking back as screams split the air loud and visceral, like an animal thrashing against its bonds. With every repetition, light burst from within her chest, swirling outward and banishing dark tendrils. She felt the lake's grip loosen. It was working. The shadows shrank, writhing as they fought against the light that streamed from their intertwined hands. Just then, a figure emerged, Lily, glowing defiantly amidst the darkness, her innocence mirrored in the brilliance that surrounded her. Mommy, Daddy, help! Her voice was vivid yet tinged with fear, ringing through the watery void. Keep going, Karen, Dan urged, drawing strength from her resolve, each word fueling the growing force of their bond. We can pull her back. By the light within, I bind thee, shadow and night. She screamed again, her heart swelling under the pressure. Let go of what is ours. The shadows recoiled, howling with fury and regret. The entity that manifested from the lake shrieked a grotesque amalgamation of fear and grief, morphing into a twisted version of Lily that gleamed with malevolence. No, Karen shouted, defiance surging through her. This isn't you. This can't be what you want. Come back to us. The monstrous image wavered. It hesitated, torn between darkness and light. Lily, we love you. You are our daughter. Dan's voice thundered against the abyss. Come back. The fight waged around them, but with every beat of their hearts, their love illuminated the frigid depths. The twisted figure, the nightmare, slowly began to dissolve beneath the light. Mommy, Daddy, the voice echoed again, softer this time, infused with the pure innocence they yearned to retrieve. Come to us. We're here, Karen called, her voice breaking free from the shackles of fear. The darkness began to shrink, flickering like a dying candle. the chains of despair shattering beneath the weight of their joined resolve. They surged forward, merging into the brilliance that defined their family, a beacon of love persistent and unwavering. Then came a pulse, a shudder through the water, a quake rippling across the surface, shaking loose the fragments of their fears. The ground trembled beneath them, in response to their love. "Do it, now," Dan shouted. And with one final shout, Karen and Dan yelled together, "By the light within, I bind thee, shadow and night." The last incantation sprung forth, releasing an explosion of light that shattered the obsidian grip around them. The lake roared back, but this time, it wasn't a roar of anger. It was an anguished cry. Shadows curled and shrieked, retreating into the wilderness, pulled back into the abyss from whence they came. Then the waters calmed. The roar subsided into a gentle lapping. The chaos ebbed away like a receding tide, revealing the shoreline once more. And there stood Lily, radiant and free, breaking through the veil of shadows, innocence restored. "Mommy, Daddy," she cried, arms open wide, the purity of her spirit igniting all hope anew. Karen collapsed into Lily's embrace, laughter bursting into tears as joy intertwined with relief. Dan joined them, wrapping them in an unyielding warmth as they clung together. The lake shimmered, returning its eerie quietness, a promise restored, a nightmare faded. The Johnson family stood united, victorious against the dark forces that had once threatened to tear them apart. Together, they walked away from the menacing shore, hand in hand, hearts synced, love blazing brightly where darkness once lay. This was their farewell to fear, a closing chapter marking the end of the hauntings, capturing a bittersweet promise of summer's return and brighter days now ahead. The shadows had been defeated, love had emerged triumphant, and they had each other. If you love this story and want to experience more heart-pounding adventures, you need to subscribe now to our channel. It's time to show your support. So smash that like button and feed the algorithm. We want you in the comments section. Let us know your reactions and theories about this ending. And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support makes a difference.